You're listening to the Snipers Club Round 24 Opening Lines Preview, and I'm your host, The Sniper. So guys, we're going to look at the matches coming up for Round 24. We're going to have a look at the injuries, and we're going to have a look at where we might be able to find early value for the week ahead. So let's kick off with Thursday's game, which is the Sea Eagles against the Panthers. The line set at plus 20.5 for the Sea Eagles, minus 20.5 for the Panthers. And at first look, you'd think this was quite generous for the Sea Eagles, but Matt Lodge is out for the season now, and they've got their forward pack looks particularly thin. They're going to be without Aloye, Paseka and Lodge. So you'd imagine that the Penrith pack would absolutely destroy them. And we think the line's probably about right on this one. Looking at the Panthers, there were a couple of concerns with minor grade shoulder injuries. One of the players that was reportedly sore in that area was Brian To'o, and the other was Liam Martin. And To'o scored 9 tries in his last 6 games, so he's been on quite a tear of late. But we don't think they're going to be particularly debilitating, and both players ought to play on Thursday. So the line looks about right here, and we'll probably just put up our usual selections on the free pod, looking at try scorers or stats-based bets for that one. So if it was a bit lower, maybe minus 18.5, then it could be interesting. But at 20.5 with the Panthers, who rarely win by cricket scores and tend to take their foot off the pedal somewhat in second halves, probably not worth taking. We will look at To'o potentially scoring his first hat-trick, whether that can happen, and To'o for 2 or more tries as well, closer to Thursday. But that's something to bear in mind. Moving on to Friday, game 1 on Friday sees the Sharks take on the Titans. The line set at minus 8.5, and that's minus 8.5 on the Sharks and plus 8.5 for the Titans. The question here really surrounds Ronaldo Mulitalo. He's missed the last 2 weeks, and it's been reported as a jaw injury. But some people close to the Sharks team have said that he actually got concussion. So if he has got concussion, then don't expect him to be named in the lineup on Team News Tuesday tomorrow. But if he is named, then expect the line to move from minus 8.5 probably to minus 10.5 or so. And the Titans have their own injury concerns. AJ Brimson has had some ongoing issues. He pulled out a pre-match training in the previous game, and it's been reported that he won't be back. So Jayden Campbell continued to deputise there, and Fotuaika's also likely to be banned. So the line looks roughly correct on that one. Just want to have a quick look to see whether Tino's going to be back for the Titans. Bear with me. Yeah, so Tino is back for the Titans, so that'll be quite big for them. But they have had some really tough games the last 2 weeks, but were very, very spirited in their defeat to the Warriors. But that was a grueling game, and they played with a man down for the majority of the match, so that will most likely work against them. So the Sharks line at 8.5, with the outside chance of Mulitalo coming back, looks quite appealing, and they'll have to win this in their bid to stay in the top 8, whereas the Titans look like they're more or less down and out. So 8.5 looks fair, especially with the Sharks hitting form. Moving on to the second game on Friday, that's the Broncos against the Eels. The line's currently set at minus 11.5 for the Broncos, plus 11.5 for the Eels. That was set at minus 10 only a few hours ago. And the main questions around the Broncos are Jesse Arthur's got concussion. Farnworth had a leg cork, but he should be back. Reynolds has got groin tightness, which isn't generally a big deal for normal players, but he is their kicker. And the Broncos have got a bye coming up, so they may decide to give him round 24 off and then bring him back in round 26. And knowing what the Broncos tend to do with Reynolds, they tend to wrap him in cotton wool when they need to. So we'd probably be on the we probably anticipate that the Broncos would leave him out, give him the rest that he needs, and bring him back in round 26. So that may affect our suggestion for Cobbo to score a hat-trick. We wouldn't be taking that without Adam Reynolds in the side, but potentially he could score 2 or more. But with Selwyn Cobbo, it's pretty difficult to predict. So we'd err on the side of Adam Reynolds not actually taking part in this game. -10 was interesting. -11.5 will probably still cover, especially against the weak Para left now, which got absolutely decimated over the course of the last game. They had the rookie playing there, and that guy's name was Arthur Miller-Steven. He scored a good try. He looked like he could be a really good player going forward, but he was particularly poor in defence, and they struggled non-stop down that left-hand side. Micah Sivo and Regan Campbell-Gillard are both out for another week due to suspension, so they'll be back the following week. The issue that Parramatta have got is that they're running out of games, and the games that they do have are particularly tough. So I think they've got the Broncos, the Panthers, and the Roosters to come. And looking at how they performed the other day, we'd have to put a line through them, which is pretty bizarre. But the draw hasn't favoured them, and they've been absolutely ravaged by injury. So let's move on to the next one. We wouldn't touch that line. Actually, I don't know. They'll probably cover the -11.5, you would think. But with Adam Reynolds out, he's worth a fair few points. So the Eels will have to come out firing because they can't afford to lose. So probably one to swerve for us here, guys. Moving on to Saturday, we've got the Rabbitohs against the Dragons. The line is currently set at -18.5 for the Rabbitohs, +18.5 for the Dragons. It was +20.5 a few hours ago, so there's money coming in for the Dragons here. The Rabbitohs have been hit pretty hard by injury, as you saw during their loss the other day. Jai Arrow, and it was a really poor loss, had back spasms, and Souths didn't look that worried about it. So potentially he may come back. It may have been caused by, travelling. They've done so much travelling of late. He may have ended up a bit sore there. Burgess is out for 3 weeks with a ban. And they've travelled to the Sunshine Coast, Tamworth and Perth of late. So that's something to bear in mind. It's not great, and it's probably led to some poor performances and some fatigue within the squad. They've still got to travel to Cairns, and then they'll be travelling to Newcastle after that. Totola is out for a couple more weeks with a knee issue, and Hame Sele is still out. So they're starting to look really, really thin in terms of their forward pack especially. So this Dragons line is appealing at +18.5, despite them potentially having Suli and Francis Molo out. Suli could come back, but we think Francis Molo will be out. But they played really well the other day, and that's probably a line worth taking with the Rabbitohs in disarray on their team sheet. Moving on to the West Tigers against the New Zealand Warriors. The Tigers played really well the other day with Appy and Luke Brooks doing exceptionally well in terms of playmaking. The main news in this one surrounds Nickel Klokstad. This is his 3rd concussion in a season, and that's a lot. So there's a real chance that he may face multiple weeks on the sidelines. Looking at other players that have had similar injuries, Ponga had 3 concussions in a season and was out for ages after his one. Wade Graham had a similar fate with his 3rd concussion, and Keegan Hipgrave as well. So looking back at precedent, if you've had 3 concussions, generally you're out for longer than 1 week. But these guys also had previous concussion issues too, which CNK doesn't. So he'll probably have to go and see a specialist and report back to the club, who will then make a decision on whether it's worth risking him or whether he's going to suffer a few weeks on the sidelines. If he does suffer a few weeks on the sidelines, that could lead to potentially a few losses for the Warriors. But it looks like they've got enough ground on the teams beneath them for it to not matter that much. And they had a very difficult game against the Titans last week. So potentially the Tigers plus 14.5 is of interest, but it's probably one to put in brackets, not the sort of game we'd want to be taking a line on here. The Tigers, Charlie Staines got a minor hamstring injury and he came off during their last game. He'll probably face 2 to 4 weeks out. Moving on, we've got the Roosters against the Dolphins. The line here is set at minus 9.5 for the Roosters, plus 9.5 for the Dolphins. They should be able to cover the 10. The Roosters were much better last week, and I think they've got one of their main players back this week. It's Sam Walker, isn't it? Bear with me 1 second. Roosters. Can't find anything on him. But I have seen for sure that he is due back this week. So that's something to bear in mind, and that'll definitely help them in attack. For the Dolphins, there's no real news to report there, guys. They were slightly unlucky to lose last weekend. The Knights made a really good comeback. And yeah, probably minus 10 is doable for the Roosters. Moving on to Sunday, we've got the Storm against the Raiders. Storm are minus 10.5. The Raiders are plus 10.5. Quite a lot to look at here. Seb Chris is going to be out for the Raiders. He had a hamstring issue which forced him off in the last game. And he looked really good at centre. He scored quite a few points. So that'll be a major issue for them. But they do have a really, really good record against the Storm. And they're generally, this is the matchup that suits them best over the course of the season. And this could potentially be an upset, as it tends to be against the Melbourne Storm. The Storm have got their own injury worries. Jennings is out with an MCL. Coates had a hip pointer issue, and he might be out for another 2 to 3 weeks. Jerome Hughes has reportedly got an ankle injury, and Bellamy said he was worried about him. But Billy Slater, who's close to the Storm, said that he's probably 50-50 for this game. So with those outs, the Raiders line looks interesting at plus 10.5, and they may even pull an upset out of the bag here, despite their slightly bizarre form where they can only win by 1 to 12. So that is an interesting line. Moving on to the final game of the round, we've got the Knights taking on the Bulldogs on Sunday. The line's currently set at minus 12.5 for the Knights, plus 12.5 for the Bulldogs. In terms of issues for either team, there's no real news or colour on what's happened to them. They both look like they'll be pretty much unchanged. The Knights have been playing really well. Anything under 12 we'd like. 12.5, not so much. But potentially they'll be able to cover this on game day. So that's pretty much it for this round. We'll keep an eye on To'o and we'll keep an eye on Cobbo. And we'll see whether Adam Reynolds does indeed make the lineup, or at least the team sheet for this weekend. We may put up a double for To'o to score 2 or more and a hat-trick, running on to Cobbo to score 2 or more and a hat-trick, depending on whether Adam Reynolds is in or not. But without Reynolds, it does become quite a much more difficult task. So you've been listening to the opening lines preview for round 24. Please like, share, and help our channel grow.